What's going on? It's time for another episode of Too Hard for the Radio. Transmitting from the future free state of Greater Idaho, I am the one-armed madman. And with me today, we've got the return of Russell Anders. Russell, I was seeing that your microphone was on mute there for a second, so hopefully we're good to go.
Oh, we're all good. Yeah, no, the FedEx guy pulled it across the street, and my
Okay,
dog had to
cool.
let him know that we're not to be messed with.
You're a professional. You're on the cough button with Zoom. Good to go. Cool, man. I appreciate it. So, I was just telling you off air, I finished reading your book last night and I was thoroughly impressed with it. I thought it was a great cyberpunk book. Like, there was a lot of really interesting elements to it. I'm going to bring up my notes in case we need to go into my notes. Because I've got a bunch of notes here because, I enjoyed it and I want to ask you about some of the technologies and some of the themes and kind of dig a little bit deeper into it than the last time around where we just kind of talked in general about, some of the themes of the book, but we
Last
kind
time
of
was
just
no spoilers. This time will be different, right?
yeah, a little bit, just because like now that I've read the book, I've got questions about themes and all that kind of stuff. So maybe a little bit less free flowing this time and a little bit more questions, but we'll see how it goes.
I'm here for it either way.
Cool, cool. So one of the things that like first stood out to me was you've got some cool prosthetics in the book. And being an amputee, I know how like crappy prosthetics are right now. And when I got hurt, like and kind of like realized that I was gonna need to get a prosthetic hand and I was gonna lose my hand. I was kind of like not worried about it. I'm like, I've seen Iron Man and the Avengers, and they'll just give me a Winter Soldier arm and I'll be good to go. And then as I started doing research and, like, talking to prosthetists and stuff, it's like, "Oh, crap," like, these things aren't nearly as good as I thought they
Right.
were? And a lot of it, I kind of thought that it was going to be the interface that was the main problem, which it is. Like, the interface kinda sucks. Like, my prosthetic has I can't reach it over there, but my prosthetic has, like, these electrodes on the inside of it that can kind of read my muscle signals and create a map and, like, do a couple of different movements, but you can't get, like, individual finger movement, you can't get, on the fly stuff, you have to, like, really concentrate on doing the right movements to get it to do what it's gonna do. The thing that I didn't really think about, like, as I was looking into these things was the socket itself sucks. Like, the way that you put it on, you've got a bare arm in plastic, you know? Which is it's kind of like I tell people it's like wearing cowboy boots with no socks on, which is just ugh. It's probably even closer to, like, high heels with no socks on because those are a little bit tighter to your feet, but, you know, it's
So you chafe?
what's that?
So you chafe?
Oh, yeah. You chafe, you sweat, it's itchy, it's just terrible, and, like, it seems like the next step is going to have to be something that's integrated into your body, kind of like what you wrote about.
So, yeah, there were two things that stood out to me when I did. First of all, so one of the characters has a prosthetic arm. Um, Honestly, the major impetus for that was just that part was aesthetics. Cyberpunk is cybernetic replacements. That's just part of the thing. Whether it's um, eyes or limbs, it's just it doesn't quite feel authentic without some chrome.
Yeah.
So I but the traditional way is to hardwire it into your nervous system, right? Just the way that your arm would be. That has been how it's been done with limbs in the past. And so with John in this book, I was thinking about how else that might be done because, like you said, that's a major stumbling block.
Mhm.
But with say Neuralink, moving cursors around with an implant, um, I had the idea of taking the limb and basically turning it into something like that. So it is bolted to his body, but it exists independently of his nervous system. He has basically a Bluetooth dongle in his head, and that interfaces with the arm. So it's kind of remote controlled, even if it's part of his body. But the big thing that the big reason I wanted to include it was a discussion that they have early in the book where he talks about if he misses a payment on it, the company
Yeah.
shuts it off.
Yeah, I thought that was great, which totally makes sense. It's like rent-seeking behavior, in a lot of
Yes.
ways. Like I've heard something recently like um you're not going to be able to buy self-driving in Teslas anymore. You're going to have to pay a monthly fee now. If you want to have your self-driving car, which is like crazy because it's a capability that the car is clearly capable of doing. It comes with this capability. So why do I have to pay a monthly subscription for it? So like that was one of the things that I thought about when I heard that. I was like, yeah, the thing's gonna get shut off. Like, oh man. You know, a lot of cyberpunk exists in a world that you can't really see happening in the future. It's like, okay, like some of these aspects of it kind of could exist, but like like, let's take Blade Runner, for instance. Like, the flying car aspect of it, probably not gonna happen. Like, I don't even know how those flying cars are supposed to work, like, what kind of engines they have. They don't seem to have any rotors or anything like that. Like, it's just there for kind of aesthetics, like you were saying with the prosthetic, it doesn't really kind of fit into what the future would actually look like. But your
Mhm.
book seemed to kind of in a lot of ways look like a future that we could absolutely see, especially with like the housing aspect of it. Like I thought that was one of the more clever aspects where you've got it it kind of reminded me like I lived in Maui for a year, and on Maui like everything's so expensive that a lot of the families that have been there forever can't really like afford to live in single family homes. So they've got them split up into what they call Filipino homes where you've got like this big house that's split up into like three different sections essentially, and then the entire family or not even the family sometimes like shares this house. And it seemed like that was kind of New York City. Like you've got this rich part of the city, kind of like how Maui has its rich parts where these rich people kind of have their own homes out away from everything and they're overlooking the ocean and the mountains and they kind of live by themselves. But the normal peons like live in these homes that are split up and segregated and segmented to where they have to do that in order to survive.
So Rockaway, where the book most of the book takes place, that's a real town inside of New York City. I grew up there.
Mhm.
And the phenomenon you're talking about is already underway there. You have these old homes, big, very, nice, beautiful sometimes, um, but they are getting split up into two and now three and sometimes even four family houses because, you know, in that case, a lot of times the people who own it don't even live there. They
Yeah.
just, they segment it so that they can rent it out to more people.
Mhm.
But that's absolutely so there's this old saying about cyberpunk, right? It's 5 minutes in the future. And that was how I approached this book was I didn't just make something out whole cloth. I looked at the world now and I saw, some trends that I was interested in talking about. And I just projected that a couple of decades into the future. If we stay on the trajectory that we're currently on, what might that look like? So I wasn't necessarily trying to predict the future as just highlight the present by exaggerating it a little bit.
Yeah, I could see it, man. Like as I'm reading the book, I'm like, does this take place 100 years from now? Is it 40 years from now? And like it could be anywhere, kind of depending on like how quick technology evolves, especially with something like Neuralink. And like the only thing that's really holding Neuralink back from being, kind of a technology that normal people utilize is like the FDA and regulations and shit like that. Like I've heard that he's going to be implanting these things into people in the Middle East in the next year, which
Mhm.
is kind of fast, but
Yeah.
also it seems like I've watched interviews of people that have these things and it seems like they work pretty damn good. And I know that like when I was looking into prosthetics, I found that like DARPA had done a BCI brain computer interface project with a really good prosthetic hand in 2012 where they took a paraplegic woman and stuck this Utah array, it was called in her brain, which has like orders of magnitude less electrodes and arrays than the current Neuralink does, like, not even close. And she was able to use this prosthetic hand on the other side of the room. And DARPA being DARPA, the first thing they did after they got the hand working was put her in a flight simulator and had her kill things with it, which, you know, that's DARPA being DARPA. But,
Of course.
it seems like we could be in a position in our lifetimes where these things are commonplace amongst normal people, which I think is kind of a scary prospect for a lot of different reasons, but especially like, it's going to create a two-tiered society, especially if they're expensive, even if they're the price of a cell phone, of an iPhone, or double the price of an iPhone. Let's say they're $5,000 a piece. Like, sure, that's enough for upper middle class people to get them if they want, but, like, what about everybody else in the country? And then what about everybody else in the world that is making a couple dollars a day? So now you've got this society where the rich people are capable of doing things with their minds that ordinary people just fully aren't capable of doing. They're able to produce more, they're able to work in AR or VR in ways that we can't comprehend. And now you've got basically transhumans versus humans.
You have just hit on the thing that ultimately drew me to write Cyberpunk. It's not the cool prosthetics or virtual reality or anything like that. It was the economic system that is typical
Mhm.
of cyberpunk. Vast gulf of wealth between the haves and the have-nots. I mean, the genre started 40 years ago, but I think it's more prescient now than ever before. And we're not changing course. The, the book isn't supposed to be, isn't that cool? It's,
How
dear God,
scary.
look,
Yeah.
yeah, like we it's not too late now to change it, but this is very clearly where we're going. And the creation, like you said, of these prosthetics, it shouldn't be scary. It should be wonderful. Look, we can just give this capability back to everybody, but we're going to tie it to a profit motive, and we're going to make it such that it's either going to be cripplingly extractive, so that it's just another way to enslave you into debt, or it's just going to be something that you don't get to have, but it's available
Yep.
to other people for no reason beyond they have money, which isn't even real. It's something we made up.
Yeah, fiat currency isn't even real at all. It's a social construct where people just are using this, currency. And like, I thought it was also cool that like money was an aspect of your book, but also barter was also a big aspect because when you live in a world where money is unattainable and the price of something is so unattainable that it doesn't matter, how much money you have, it's just completely out of your league. So you have to hustle and you have to, be a criminal in order to like kind of utilize the same tech that the upper class like already has access to, which I thought Malcolm was a great character because like this was a guy that, the corporate class would consider to be a criminal and a low life, but at the same time, like he's helping people around him. He's helping his family. He's helping his neighbors. Like he's giving them access to tech that they don't have access to because it's not meant for them. It's not meant for these low life people who live in the Rockaways. It's meant for people in Pluto to enjoy
Right.
and to utilize. And it's meant for these corporate, entities to keep, you know, making profit and making gains. And, I was told by my lawyer when I, got hurt in North Dakota that I am the first person in North Dakota workers' comp history to get a prosthetic hand. They just don't give them out. They say,
Wow.
"You don't need it." They had a guy that went to the Supreme Court and ended up losing and didn't get the hand, and the only reason that I was able to get the hand is because I'm a persistent pain in the ass, and workers' comp made a mistake when they
Mm.
were when they were dealing with my case. They brought in an outside company to kinda manage my case because they were sick of dealing with me, essentially, and it ended up giving this company a vote when it came to picking what type of prosthetics I got. So it was the Mayo Clinic and this company versus workers comp, and they ended up losing. But it still took like well over a year to go through the appeals process because they just weren't going to do it. They're like, nope, we're not doing it. Like, I don't care. We don't care what these other companies said. And it's like, well, you're going to have to at some point because like this is the hole that you dug yourself into.
And I'm sure that the reason that they were resisting was financial, right?
Mhm.
Like they just wanted to hang on to the
Yep.
money.
They pay back enough money in dividends to companies in North Dakota every year to buy every amputee in the country a prosthetic hand. That's how much money is flowing in. You think like the main industry in North Dakota is oil. So you've got these companies that they're paying dividends back to who don't need the money. Like these are some of the biggest, richest companies in the country. They don't need the money, but they would rather take their dividends and pay out their investors than take care of the people that they hire to work for them.
Yeah. And so that's the that was the reason why the genre called to me ultimately, and I started writing that and left fantasy behind. But this is this was a reason why I felt called to actually write it, because I had been reading a lot of cyberpunk, and they were getting the aesthetics right. I mean, honestly, I can't even remember the names of a lot of these books. Like they
Mhm.
all sort of blend together for me, because it was, noir stories of private investigators. It was corporate operatives. Yes, people had cybernetic implants. It was urban sprawl. It was oftentimes raining. But so they had the setting, but nobody took a look at what it meant to actually have a society that would create that setting.
Yeah.
And so, it was just sort of taken as a given. And that was the part that kept smacking me in the face. I'm like, but why is everybody okay with this?
Yeah. And like in fantasy, there's some good fantasy that deals with moral quandaries.
Mhm.
Like you've got the Lord of the Rings where you're talking good and evil, and that's good stuff. That's great stuff to dissect within a book. And I've never read those books, but from what I understand, they did a very good job on that. Dune was similar. Like Dune was kind of the same thing. You were talking about morals and ethics rather than like the dangers of technology. But what you can't really do in fantasy is kind of show like how these technologies could affect the world that you live in today. Like
Yes.
in fantasy, you're in a completely different world where things don't necessarily line up with reality. Where, like in Cyberpunk, you can kind of comment on society at large today and what's coming down the pike at you in the near future, which I think is important. I think it's important for people to get an idea of like how powerful these corporations are. How powerful. Like one of the things I enjoyed about it is like we live in a system today where the government puts up this front that they're in charge, and
Mhm.
and people like I got into an argument with a family member a couple years ago. It started over Bitcoin, but it kind of like went down the line after that. Like he was telling me, "Oh, you have too much faith in Bitcoin. The government's going to get rid of it soon." I'm like, "You don't know what you're talking about." A and B, like without getting into a conversation with Bitcoin, I was like, "You realize that they just launched this ETF, right? And this ETF is an avenue for these billionaires and these big corporations to buy Bitcoin like cheaply and easily." And he's like, "Oh, well, that doesn't matter." And I go, "Wait a minute, wait a minute. Who do you think is in charge in this country? Is it the government or is it the corporations and the billionaires?" He's like, "Oh, it's the government, of course." And he used to be a cop, so he kind of has this idealist idea about the government being a force for good, which is, in my opinion, just naive and ridiculous. But I'm like, do you realize that, like, in order to get elected to any position in power in this country, you have to kiss the ring of the billionaires and the corporations. And like if the billionaires and the corporations didn't like the system we were living in today, they would get rid of it immediately. It
Oh,
would
100%.
end, like they like this system of fiat currency and they'll whatever, we'll pay some taxes every year. It doesn't take off of our front end, like, it barely makes a dent in our economic model. But what it does allow for is for us to game the system and steal money from the lower class and to kind of run a monopoly on force and, the direction that the country is going in.
I mean, when there's an election, one of the metrics by which a candidate's viability is measured is how much they're holding in money.
Mhm.
What is their war chest?
Yep.
Like that's supposed to matter, but it does. And the fact that it does is the problem. So you're 100% correct. Like the politicians are the front, they're the mask, they're basically the public relations board.
Mhm.
But you're right. I mean, there was a study done back in I think 2010. It compared the popular opinion polls of certain policies versus how often they were enacted by the government. And for the broad public, it it was like a 50-50, right? It was a split. Like it didn't really seem to matter how popular or unpopular a measure was based on depending upon how often it was actually implemented into law. But you get into what the top 1% wanted, and they had a 90% pass rating.
Mhm.
It's right there in the numbers. The money rules.
Yeah, and what I liked about your book was, like, the government was kind of a non-factor. Like, these were like, this entire town that, like, the majority of the book takes place in is ran by a corporation, and, like, I see that happening in the near future. When I was working in North Dakota, like, the town itself had no say in what was happening. Like, you had these massive Halliburton and, big companies like that are in here that are controlling massive swaths of land that, like, at one point, we had, a job out on this fracking site where, they've got probably $1 billion worth of equipment out there. I don't really know, like, they've got these things in boxes, like, their fracking equipment is in, like, shipping containers because they don't want anybody to see what they're actually doing. It's all hidden, and all you can really see is a pump and a line going into the ground, which I thought was very, very suspect, like, what are you guys pumping into the earth right now? Anyways, like, we're out there and we're, bringing power to them. And some guy in a suit walks over and goes, "Hey, you," and he just points at a guy, "You and you over here right now. I need you guys to piss in a cup." And we're like, you're not our boss. Like, what are you talking about? And he's like, "Well, you're working on our site. We make the rules and we need to make sure that you're clean." So, like, one of our guys ended up popping dirty for marijuana, and they forced our company to fire this guy because
Not
if
just the
if
job.
if you don't fire this guy, you're not allowed back on our sites anymore.
Yeah, I heard the same thing just recently about the credit card companies starting to do. They pressured Steam about what games they would allow, in their store. If you're going to sell games with this kind of content, we're not gonna process payments for you.
Yeah. So, do you think that, like, in the near future, so right now there's like this mask kind of where these corporations act like the government's in charge. But, like, at some point, do you think that these corporations are gonna be powerful enough? Like, I don't know. I remember during COVID, I was listening to a stream with a guy named Michael Malice, who's one of my favorite political commentators. He's an anarchist. He's very funny, very smart guy. And he was playing an interview with Ayn Rand on Donahue from, like, 70s. And it was really interesting to, like, watch her kind of spar with Donahue over, the current state of the world. And at one point, like, one of these students that was watching asked her, like, "Well, what do you think about this company holding a monopoly on this, product?" Or I don't even remember. And, like, she's like, "Monopolies, aren't a problem. Like, smaller companies come in and displace these bigger companies, and that's how capitalism works." And, like, the company that this woman brought up to Ayn Rand doesn't even exist anymore. So, like,
Mm.
her point was kind of like made. But, 50 years later, this company doesn't exist. They were displaced by another company. But it seems like when you look at Amazon, like, I barely buy anything from physical stores anymore. A lot of the times, like, I'll need something for a construction project around my house, and I'll go to Lowe's or Home Depot, and you can't find anybody who knows where anything is in the store. They're, head buried in their little Palm Pilot, like trying to figure out where something is. You don't
Mhm.
have people working there that are familiar with, like, I went in to buy a nail gun one day because I needed a nail gun for a project, and I couldn't find anybody who knew anything about nail guns, you know? Like, the guy's like, "Well, I don't know, you could probably use this one." I'm like, "Have you ever used a nail gun?" "Well, I've kind of done this and that." And it's like, back when I was a kid and our local Ace Hardware was up the street from our house, you had a retired construction worker in there working in power tools. It was a retirement job for him. He was an older 65, and he knew everything about every tool that was in there. But it seems to me like Amazon has become such a monster and a megalith within, retail, that these companies aren't even really trying to compete with them anymore. Like, you have contractors that are gonna go into Lowe's and Home Depot because they know what they want, and you've got
Yes.
certain people that are gonna go in there because they know exactly what they want, and it's easier to go get it on Saturday because we have the day off and we decided to do this project today. But, like, for the most part, if I need something, I order it on Amazon, and I have a hard time thinking that some other company in retail is gonna come in and displace them. It feels like it's different now than when it was in the '70s when Ayn Rand was talking about these monopolies.
It does feel different. I agree with you. I think that uh, I mean to continue with the Amazon analogy. I think what is the reason why they're not getting. I don't see any meaningful competition coming from them because anybody who does begin to to challenge them is just absorbed.
Mhm.
They kind of they do they're sort of playing the corporate version of the Roman Empire. Like they don't just come in and smash the competition. It's like, oh, you offer something that we don't. Great. We're going to now acquire you,
Yeah.
and now you are part of us, and we offer that. So it's not like they're stifling anybody's ability to theoretically become competitive, but before they get anywhere near that big, they're just subsumed.
Yeah, and, like, when I lived in San Francisco, I was close to a person that was a, investment banker with Goldman Sachs, and she ended up quitting that job and starting up a startup company, and I remember, like, "Okay, like, what's the end goal for this company?" Because, like, I didn't see it being a successful company. It was like a crafting company where you make these craft boxes and send them out to people, and they build whatever, and I was like, "This doesn't seem like a viable business." But she had a bunch of, like, high-powered investors that were willing to invest in her, not necessarily her company, but her, because she had connections and she knew what she was doing. And, like, I had never been close to, like, people who were playing this large corporate shell game, essentially. And what I came to realize after talking to her about this was that the goal was never to build a successful company to work at for the rest of her life. The goal was to build a company that found a niche that a big corporation didn't already control and sell. That was the
Yep.
whole deal. So, like, people these days are not even trying to build a company that's going to outperform or carve a niche into something that Amazon does. They want to find something that Amazon doesn't have control over already, build a company, mm, you know, make it work for a couple of years and then sell. Like, that's the whole game at this point. And I think it's kind of crazy because, like, me and you come from a time where people who started a business wanted to, like, run this business for the rest of their lives and leave it to their children, you know?
Yes.
And now it seems like they just want to start a business so they can sell out.
100%. And the other thing is, because this came across in my research when I was doing this book, companies aren't well, let's say the monoliths. They're not specialists anymore. Like you mentioned Ace Hardware. Well, you think
Mhm.
of that, and you think a hardware store. Like um, construction material and tools and whatnot. But these gigantic companies now, they they sell the brand, not the product. So they can and do go everywhere. So they can acquire absolutely anything. I mean, Amazon is now in the grocery business.
Yeah.
You know, what the hell does that have to do with like ordering? I mean, they started as an online bookseller.
Bookstore. Yeah.
Now they're in groceries. They do pharmacy. You can even get a nurse line through them. So they're absolutely borderless. They cross all vectors of industry or all verticals of industry,
Yeah.
which means that they can swallow up anything.
And now Jeff Bezos is going to space, you know?
Uh,
And, like,
yep.
that's one of the things that I worry about a lot is space because, like, space is borderless right now. We don't really have a foothold up there in an industry that is profitable. Like I remember I like watching space videos on Amazon. Geez, it's in my mind now. Maybe I will be watching space videos on Amazon in the near future and they're going to have, a YouTube style thing. But anyways, I was watching this video where one of the comments was like talking about how NASA is a profitable government agency. And it's like, what are you talking about? Like, if they were profitable, they wouldn't need to be stealing my money every year. Well, they created technology that, and it's like, so what? They created technology, and then a private company took that technology and they sell it for way more than it's worth. But, anyways, um, I don't remember where I was going with this, but like I kind of feel like space, the final frontier is going to be corporate monopolies. Like imagine if we get to a point, a couple hundred years from now where you're building these O'Neill cylinders, which is kind of I don't know if you're familiar with an O'Neill cylinder, but it's a large cylinder that kind of spins and creates centrifugal force gravity essentially. And like if you've got a corporation, if Amazon is building one of these, O'Neill cylinders for people to live in, you're going to be a permanent renter. You're not going to be able to buy property in one of these things. You're going to be renting an apartment or a house or whatever it is from the company that built the space station. And like, it seems like a scary prospect, and I think, like, we're already moving away from private ownership of land in America today, like, most people are fully incapable of buying a house. Inflation is so crazy. I think the average age of the first time home buyer in America right now is like 41, which is crazy. And it's also pushing people to have less families.
Yes.
Young men aren't getting married as quickly and as frequently as they did in the past, like when our parents got married. And it's just becoming harder and harder to like own anything for yourself. A lot of people don't even own the cell phone that they have. They're renting it essentially from the company.
Yeah. No, I think it's a very optimistic picture to think that you will be renting something in like an O'Neill cylinder or something like that, because I mean right now they are there's there's stated ambitions for bringing back company towns.
Mhm.
So I mean you don't even rent then, like that's just you get housing as part of your employment, and if
Yeah.
you get fired, out.
Yep.
You know, so it's not even like you have renter protections.
No,
You'll have fewer rights.
when
And
I when I lived in North Dakota, I was working for a contractor and we lived in the yard, in our yard that we kept our trucks in, that we kept all of our equipment in. Like they had, like essentially double wide trailers set up for us to live in. And they had, we called them man camps because it was just camps full of thousands of men and all over the towns that we lived in. Like there wasn't enough space in the nearby towns for people to build in. And also people didn't really want to live there. A lot of the people that worked there kind of had no other where to go like and work because one of the craziest parts about working there was like on every Friday when you drove through town, the cash checking places had lines a mile long. And it's because like a lot of the people working there, not all of them, like I wasn't included, but a lot of the people working there had warrants, they had child support that was back due, and the only way that they could hide money from the government and not have it stolen from them through child support or wherever else they owed money from was to cash their check. And
Right.
they lived in a corporate man camp. Like you don't own anything.
Mhm.
It was a weird, weird place, and, like, I could see that happening, like, mining camps, like, back in the day, and I've been to some of these, like, ghost towns in Nevada where silver mines used to exist, where you had just these massive swaths of property where people lived, and like you said, it was owned by the corporation. You even use corporate, like,
Rip.
dollars, like, they had their own money system set up where essentially they were paying you and then taking everything back from you at the end of
Yes.
the week. Here, we'll give you $200 on Friday so you can give us 150 on Saturday.
Yep. And it reduced mobility because then
Yeah.
even if you are saving, you're saving company money, which isn't good anywhere outside of that company
Nope.
town.
And the
So,
exchange rate on it is horrible. So if
yep,
you've got $50 in company cash and you want to exchange it for dollars, you're only going to get 20 bucks back.
which traps you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
and so I think we're gonna hit that long before we hit, uh, resident like, general residency in space. I think
yeah.
that that's just well in place.
Yeah. It's like look at how what's happening with real estate right now, where you've got BlackRock and Blackstone and a couple other corporations that are just buying up real estate all over the country. And a lot of times they're buying it for 10 to 20% over retail because for them, we've got the money to spend on this stuff. It doesn't matter if we spend an extra 10% on a couple houses or whatever. The whole plan is to gobble up all of the real estate available and create a permanent renter class.
Which they then run through an algorithm to make sure that they are charging the absolute maximum amount
Yep.
that they can without cutting into their potential client base.
Yeah. Did you work in corporate America or do you work in corporate America? Because it seems like you've got a pretty good idea for how they work.
I do work in corporate America, but this is also, an area of particular interest to me. Like, I do not like this system in the slightest.
Yeah.
And rather than just grouse about it, I spend a lot of time getting and keeping informed, and then that informs my writing.
Yeah. And I mean, it shouldn't be a knock on anybody to work in corporate America. Like I feel like the whole goal is to do the best that you can for your family. And if that requires like contributing to a system that you're not really fond of, then so be it. Like we don't have the ability today to kind of take the higher road and say, well, like I don't like the way this system runs, so I'm going to do something else. And it's like, well, if you take a 20, 30, 40% pay cut to go do something that you makes you sleep better at night, well, then that hurts your family. And
Yes,
like the better route is to create the best life for your family that you possibly can, in my opinion, anyways.
I agree. And these days, I mean, frankly, the office job doesn't pay what it used to either, not
No.
relative to expenses. So taking a 40% pay cut, you know, means you might have to maybe move,
Yeah.
and then good luck.
Yeah. I've got a buddy who works in like he does like how do I even describe it? He consolidates debt for people essentially. So he has a big list of people that he calls up every day and it's like, all right, look, you've got a ton of debt and credit cards, you've got debt on your house, you've got a car that you shouldn't have. Like, we can consolidate all of this, buy the debt back from you. You get 20%, discount rate on it because we can do a deal with the credit card companies or the bank or whoever and kind of make this happen for you. And he says that everybody is like hanging on his every word throughout the call. I can do this for you. I can do that for you. And it's everybody's all in until right at the end when he tells them you have to get rid of all of your credit cards. And then they go, oh, well, if I do that, then I have to move. I have to sell my car. We can't go on vacation this year. And they're out, completely out because we gotten used to this system of debt where everybody is in debt essentially. Like uh I never got into huge debt with credit cards or anything like that. And like I got a small payout from workers comp after I got hurt and I didn't really know exactly what I wanted to do with it. So I kind of went around to a couple of different like money managers and kind of asked some questions. And one of the things that I was kind of surprised about was they were like, looking at your, expenses and how you live your life, like you're doing everything right. Like as long as you're responsible with this money, like you're gonna be fine. Like you don't really worry about it. And it kind of like hit me. It was like, wow, the thing that's really killing people is not necessarily not having money, it's the way they spend the money that they have. And by being responsible, like it puts you in a different spot. But like I'm okay with not having the highest standard of living. Like I respected the people. Like one of the coolest things I saw when I was living in Maui was I was working for this roofer, and this guy had built this incredible house, like up on like the base of the mountain. It had a mountain view, it had an ocean view, just a beautiful like disappearing edge pool, like just an awesome house. And when I started working for him, he had recently got divorced and he was living in the garage. You know, like he couldn't afford the house anymore, but he didn't want to sell it because he built it himself and he loved this house. So he kind of decided, hey, look, I don't have to go and I'm not going to go and take out credit cards and loans and refinance in order to like keep living in my master bedroom. I'm going to move into the garage. I'm going to save my money. I'm going to keep working and I'm going to put myself in a great position to where at some point, especially if I meet a new chick, like I can move back into my house. And I
Yeah.
remember like thinking, I know people in Northern California where I'm from that refused to do that. They got divorced. They had this house that they had built themselves. It was a beautiful place and they couldn't like humble themselves to go move into the attic. They had to stay in the house and, you know, do whatever they could financially in order to keep it. And like it's kind of a like you're putting yourself in a position to where at some point you're probably going to lose that house based on your vanity.
100%. To be fair to those people, I think that some of this is I don't want to necessarily say it's by design, though. Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
Here's me with a tinfoil hat on, but um, you know, part of my primary education did like money management didn't enter into it at all, not once. Right? Like I had a father who knew how to handle money, so I learned from him, but nothing in my as far as society was concerned in my upbringing. I was not taught anything about managing money, budgeting, none of that.
Me
Um,
neither.
you know, and some of the things that I've been thinking about more recently, or that I've even read about in some books, beyond financial illiteracy being rampant, it's also the cultural values that we're
Mhm.
being sold by by media. By I mean, if you remember the first speech that George W. Bush gave after 9/11, he urged people to go out and go shopping.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
was patriotic. Go out and shop.
Yeah.
One one of the best examples of this I saw in a cyberpunk book. There was a billboard and it said "Buy American," but it said "Buy, comma American,"
Oh,
and
man.
that's what we are.
Yeah. Yeah. I never thought about that. I do remember that speech, go out and buy something. And I kind of took it as like, don't be afraid to go out and go shopping. But now that I think about it, that's not the point at all. It was go out and spend your money with corporate America because if you don't, like,
The stock market just took a gigantic dump.
exactly, exactly. Man, that's crazy. All right, so when before I got into line work and I got hurt, I was a bartender. And I worked in a lot of sports bars and even like the Italian restaurant that I worked in, we always had sports up on the TVs. And I ended up moving here to Idaho. And when I got hurt, I was on a much lower wage than the wage I was making in bartending in San Francisco. So I move here, and at this time, I still had traditional cable, like DirecTV, or I guess it wasn't cable, it was satellite, whatever it was. And, I didn't have a ton of money. My ex-wife was a disaster, so we weren't doing very well. And, like, I was a 49ers fan. I'm from the Bay Area, so, like, I was into the 49ers, and like, you couldn't watch the 49er game here in Idaho. You could only watch the Seahawks essentially because that was the local game. You got whatever morning game and night game and Monday night game. And at some point I was like, you know what? I'm not going to spend 150, $200 a month, whatever it is, to buy the NFL Sunday ticket. I'm just not going to do it. And I kind of stopped watching football. And at some point, like a few years after I got hurt, I kind of ran out of things to watch on TV and got into books and got into YouTube and just kind of went away from this traditional like TV system that we have. And a
Mhm.
couple years later, I tried to get back into football again because it became a little bit easier to watch it. And right away, I was just like, these commercials are just ridiculous. Like you spend and by that time you couldn't like you used to be able to start the game late and kind of fast forward through the commercials, but now they've made it impossible to do that. And like I remember thinking like I just can't do this. I can't sit here for 3 hours, to watch a football game and have 2.5 hours of that be commercials. It's just too much. I can't fricking do it. So I didn't go back. And like, to be honest, like, at some point and this kind of fits into Cyberpunk as well, like, when I was living in San Francisco, the 49ers had a great team. Jim Harbaugh was the coach. They had this Kaepernick guy who I'm not a fan of, but, like, they had a great team, and
Mhm.
it turned out that the coach didn't get along with the GM, and the owner took the side of the GM, so they fired the coach that made them a great team, and at some point, I realized, like, I'm not even cheering for a team. This I'm cheering for some rich guy. The players come and go, like, this is just some rich guy's toy, essentially, that I'm actually cheering for, and, like, why would I pay money to advertise for his ridiculous, hobby, essentially? And anyways, I, um I was watching a show on Amazon, a couple weeks ago, Fallout, which I think is a pretty good show, and they've got it now to where they've got commercials playing throughout the show, and you have to pay extra to get to have no commercials, and I couldn't do it because it was only 8 episodes, and, like, dude, the advertising was just out of control. It's like 70% pharmaceuticals, like 20% insurance, and then 5% everything else. Like, it was or
Yeah.
10%, whatever it adds up to, and it was just crazy to, like, see this corporate advertising model where they're just beating you over the head with these pharmaceuticals, and then they list all of the for half of the commercial is them listing the possible side effects for this stuff, and I just was thinking like, "Man, this is the advertising is just crazy." And like, imagine what's gonna happen with advertising in the future when you're watching these things in AR or VR and they're able to tap into your senses and to make you feel things. And like this was something that you explored heavily. It was a big part of your book was advertising. And like
Yeah.
man, last thing on the advertising, I watch dirt bike racing is, like, the only thing I really watch religiously on TV, and last year, they started running commercials in between, like, key moments of the race, and I ended up buying the no commercials thing, and then this year, I start watching it, I'm like, "Why am I getting commercials again? I'm paying for no commercials." And I go and I look at the thing, and now it has a little asterisk next to it that says, "Limited commercials." And it's like, man, even when you pay to get rid of them, for some reason, like, I don't know who's putting pressure on these companies to, like, put the advertising in, but you can't even pay to get rid of them anymore.
Yeah. I I included advertising, not necessarily commercials, but
Yeah.
because I mean, I was doing it as parody, but I don't see it staying that way for all that long, right? Like, anybody who's willing to advertise anything, um, they're going to find a way to do it. Like I was thinking about you were talking about um, football, and my mind went to Do you remember in the movie Demolition Man,
Mhm.
radio stations became just playing old jingles?
Yeah.
And that seems ridiculous, except when you get to the Super Bowl, you have compilations just of the ads that were run at the Super Bowl. And
Yeah.
people talk about it like it's entertainment. Like we're here already.
Yeah, it's crazy, and, like, a lot of people watch the Super Bowl specifically for the commercials. Like, they don't even
Yes.
care about, like, what happens in the game. It's the only game they watch all year, and it's because of the commercials, and, like, I don't know, like, the last time I watched the Super Bowl was, like, last year. I went to a friend's house who was having a Super Bowl party, and, like, I kind of watched it, and I remember thinking, like, "These aren't the same ads that they were playing, like, when I was a kid." The ads were funny back then, and now they're not even funny anymore. It's just like normal ads with high paid actors doing them. And like I see like you'll see like, Robert De Niro doing some fucking insurance commercial or something like that. And it's like, dude, what are you doing? Like you would think that you would have some sort of humility and like I've got enough money. I don't need to lower myself to a point where I'm, shilling this ridiculous product to everyday people who enjoy my movies. But they have no shame. They don't care. It's just what they do.
Yeah. No, 100%. And when we do shift to AR, I don't see it going well for us. I do
No.
think that it'll be something like you'll be bombarded by ads and then you have to pay in order to even get to something that is functional so that you're not just swimming in the spam. Um, and I also think that I could very easily see it being something like advertising becomes protected speech.
Hmm.
So paying to tamp it down beyond a certain level of corporate consent would then just be in violation of their First Amendment rights because corporations are people, my friend.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. And like one of the things that I enjoyed about your book and that I see in everyday life is like just because technology is getting better doesn't mean it's improving people's lives. Like
yes,
you've got this high tech world, but the people are essentially living in the same, state of fight or flight that they're living in today. And like, I don't, you know, we haven't seen a lot of technological change in our lifetimes. Like, cars are pretty much the same. We've got an electric car now, but it doesn't really work as good as the car that, came before it. Like, we've got these cell phones, the iPhone kind of changed things, but like, we're still basically running the same iPhone with a little bit better OS and more
yeah, these
storage
days,
space. Like it hasn't improved people's lives in a meaningful way.
some ways it's made it worse.
Yeah. People are addicted to the internet, they're addicted to porn. Like it's really destroyed a lot of people's lives and it hasn't made most people's lives any better. Like some people, sure, they're able to use the technology for a job, feed their families and create wealth for themselves, but for the most part like it's broadened people away from, you know, person on person interactions. It's not giving people that joy of like having a relationship in real life. A lot of people live on the internet today and like I thought that like the relationship between Freddie and Nana Robin was a great look at like, hey, look, this guy has lived in technology. He's lived on the internet for his entire life. And like when he finally has a person to person interaction that is more meaningful than technology, it's the most important thing in his life. Like it's got
Yeah,
him to a point where he'll do anything to keep her safe and to stay with her. And like that's not even, having a wife. Like this is
right.
just someone who he views as like a mother figure, and like this is sure it's a great relationship for him, but it could be even better.
So you just hit on something that I really wanted to do with this book, because there is a magic element to it, but it wasn't. I didn't put it in there just so that I could have like, oh, it's cyberpunk, but there's also magic.
Mhm.
Um, the two were in opposition to each other thematically. So where technology tends to atomize society, everybody is they got their face in their screen and everyone's effectively alone. Even when they are interacting with the entire world, it's
Yeah.
really just a screen. Um, magic, especially in this book, magic is always individual. There is no corporation that's going to mass print contracts to sign with the devil. It's you have to have a talk with, in this case, Lucifer, and then you have a demon, or they have a demon, and everything that comes from that contract is based on their agency, right?
Yeah.
Like they're not being told by their demons what to do. They've just been giving the arrangement, and then they are responsible for everything that they do with that demonic power and in order to keep it. Unlike the lives that they led through the corporation, where they were very easily able to lie to themselves. These were paramilitary operatives, and they even have that argument early in the books. Like, you killed people, you blew up cars, you
Yeah.
kidnapped people. It's like, yeah, but we were making the world a better place. That's what they told us. Like,
Mhm.
I was just doing my job. They don't get that. With the magic, highlighted that human essence that cannot be commodified and cannot be mass produced at scale. And it stood in opposition to, I mean, it wasn't benign. In this particular case, the magic is malicious. It comes from hell. It's bad. The entire thing is a kind of a classic morality play.
Yeah.
It's still, even when they were kind of in the grips of evil, they were at their most human. They were not reduced to drones that were faceless, interchangeable cogs within a broader system, which is what happened to everybody else who got sucked up into that whole apparatus.
Yeah, and they were also not, like, holier than thou people who were incapable of doing wrong. Like, I'm reading The Expanse right now. I really loved the TV show The Expanse, and it took me a while to crack into the books because I wanted, like, kind of my memory of the show to kinda fade before I got into
Mhm.
the books, and, like, James Holden is this guy who is essentially, like, willing he's never willing to compromise. Like, he's just this holier than thou character who is unwilling to, like, do something immoral or unjust, like, regardless of the consequences for good or bad. Where your characters were, you know, not the greatest people. Like,
Deeply false.
they had contributed to an evil system. They were sure they were propagandized, but they were smart enough to know that what they were doing was wrong, and I'm sure that that was something that they had to battle with and kind of push to the side because, "Hey, I've gotta do what I've gotta do to get by," you know?
Flat
And
out says so early in the book. He's like,
yeah,
"Look, I live in a great apartment with a
yeah.
with a biometrically slaved mattress. I sleep fine."
Yeah, exactly. And like it's one of those things where I like seeing real people. I like seeing the messiness of morality. I like seeing people who have to battle with like is what I'm doing right or wrong, and not just somebody who is incapable of doing wrong. Like I humanity is messy, ethics are messy, morality is messy. There's always this space in between that it's kind of hard to judge at some point. It's like what I'm doing right and what I'm doing wrong. Like especially with John and Freddy, like John is watching Freddy get consumed by this demon essentially. And every time this demon comes out, it is taking more and more of his friend away. And he even says in the book, like, he thought about killing him for a long time and he knew that he had to die because there was no way that he could come back. The demon was even eating him from the inside by the end.
Yes.
Like, he wasn't even looking like a human being anymore. And like, he had to make this decision of like, this is my friend, but it's also not my friend anymore,
Yes.
and like, how do I how do I justify doing the right thing with doing something at that point? If he would have decided that he could keep him around, it would be for his benefit, no longer Freddy's.
Right. Yeah. Um, Grappling with what the right thing to do was became a huge part of the book because I these were people who could live a life without agency.
Mhm.
They just did what they were told and everything was fine. And now suddenly they have so much power that everything they do really matters, whether they're aware of it or not. And in the beginning, they're not aware. Like, a lot of the book is them getting slapped in the face by ramifications of the decisions that they make. finding out that they actually do have quite a bit of influence. And they, in their own way, each of them has to come to this realization that the decisions that they make are very important. And I wanted to stress that you know we're all in that position. The world
Mhm,
is the way it is because we've decided we're okay with it. Whether we're really okay with it or not, like this whole thing wouldn't happen without broad consent.
mhm,
You know, the people at the very top, like they are that way because we allow them to be. It's not. I'm not saying that changing would be easy, but we're the frogs in the water. It's getting hotter and hotter. We kind of know it. We're all pretty uncomfortable now, but we're still hanging out. And um, by creating these characters and putting them in this exaggerated position, it allowed me to make that point without wagging a finger and
mhm,
saying you should this, you should that. No, but like it demonstrates what happens when you abdicate your decision making. Someone else will act instead,
yeah.
and it does not serve us.
Yeah, this is something that I've struggled with in my own life. Like right now, like I'm on disability, and like I'm an anarcho-capitalist. I don't think disability should exist. Like I don't think that we should be forced to pay into this system that may or may not take care of us if something happens to us. But like that's not the world we live in. Like in an ideal world, in my eyes, like if you go and work for a company that has dangerous working conditions, like me doing line work, that company should have insurance that takes care of the person if something is going to happen to them.
Right.
But that's like not the world that we live in. The world that we live in, every paycheck that I've ever gotten has had money taken out of it for disability. And like I'm not going to just say, "Ah, you know what? I don't think this exists, so I'm not going to take advantage of it when I need it." Type of thing. It's like I'm told every day by talking heads on the news and, politicians that we sign a social contract to live in this country. Well, that social contract says that you take care of somebody after they're injured, and they steal money from my paycheck every freaking week that I worked. I worked my ass off over and over again. And then they didn't want to give it to me. And I had to take them to court and battle. And it took 3 years for me to get this disability dispute with them finally settled. And it's one of those things where like I've had people ask me before in my personal life, like, hey man, like you advocate for this anarcho-capitalist system, yet you're on disability. How do you square that? And it's like, well, uh, I'm forced to live in a system that I don't like. It doesn't mean that I have to ride my moral high horse and say, I'm not going to take this when I need it because I believe that the system should operate in a different way. It just doesn't work that way.
Right. I forget who said it. I saw this recently though. It's like, but you don't need to opt out of a system completely in order to oppose it.
Yeah. Exactly. Like you working in corporate America, you're seeing
Right.
how the sausage is made, and you're also taking care of your family. Like it doesn't mean that you can't be critical of the system that you're participating in, you know.
Right.
It's different than like, in Nuremberg the Nazis, I was just doing my job. Well, your job was openly
Genocide.
immoral, like you were killing people, like that's completely different than like working as a cog in a system that maybe is not necessarily a force for good, but at the same time, like what you're doing isn't necessarily like throwing people in a gas chamber. So it's completely different in that aspect.
Yes.
You know, another thing I wanted to bring up that I thought was very interesting about the book, and this is something I've talked about for a while, is digital drugs. Like, I think that the street drugs that people are on today are antiquated and they're going to be a thing of the past very soon. Because as you're capable of putting like a Neuralink brain computer interface within your body, you're going to be able to program your body to produce the endorphins and the serotonin that is created by taking these drugs, and you're going to be able to live in a constant state of bliss if you want to.
Yeah.
And like what that's going to do to you as a person, like, oh my god, it's a scary thing. Like there's already, like, I would say porn social media. These are already digital drugs. These are endorphin producing digital, functions within our society that are essentially pushing people to be, couch potatoes for the lack of a better term. They're, sitting, in a dark room behind a computer playing video games are the same thing. Like video games are a digital drug in a lot of ways, but we're going to get to a point soon where you're not going to have to play the game to get the reaction from your brain. You're just going to be able to hit a button or tell your brain to do whatever it is. And like I can't imagine what that's going to do to society.
I Not good things.
Not good things, right?
I mean, and especially, I mean, think about it. So you're absolutely right, because when you take a look at the effects that a lot of drugs have, alcohol, marijuana,
Yeah.
they all, you keep hearing the reference of, it causes a dopamine release. Well,
Mhm.
and you're right, like that's what social media does. It's been designed to do that. So yes, it is addictive. Same deal with video games. So when you get to a point where you can just hit a button, um, I think that the proliferation is going to be fantastic, because with physical drugs, with chemicals, you still have to somehow acquire it
Yes.
and it be produced.
Yes.
But if it's code, I mean, that's just copy, 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 copy. You just, the app can proliferate almost instantly as soon as it's written, and then it's available anywhere. There's no production line. There's no acquisition getting in your way. The only thing will be how they gatekeep it financially,
Yeah.
because they absolutely will.
And prohibition is not gonna stop open source coding,
Not
Like, if you're just capable of writing a code and putting it on Twitter, like, how is anybody gonna stop that? Maybe the government will say you're not allowed to do that, and then Twitter will say, "We'll take it down." But, there's still child porn on Twitter today. I watched a Predator Catch video just last night where the guy was talking about watching child porn on Twitter, and that was one of the big things that Elon Musk said he was gonna do when he took over Twitter was get rid of that shit, but apparently it's still there because you're able to get around things, Sure, they're able to encode an algorithm that finds that stuff, but smart people are capable of getting around shit like that. I was just having a conversation with my mother yesterday about there's somebody in her life that is struggling from alcoholism right now. It's like a family friend, friend of their son's friend's father essentially is like dealing with alcoholism. And I think that like alcohol is one of the worst drugs because it's so easily accessible. Where like my point was like when you're on heroin, when you're on meth, like you kind of know what you're doing is wrong. Like
Yeah.
you know that like this is a bad thing that you're doing. And it's easier to get off of that stuff in a way because if you're buying drugs from a single person, you can delete that person's number, you can bust your phone, you can get a new phone and just stay away from that person. But with alcohol, it's everywhere. And I think like one of the biggest problems is that you look at it like I had my ex-wife was an alcoholic and it was like, "Well, everybody else is doing it. Why can't I do it?" And it was like, "Well, because it doesn't destroy everyone else's life and it does destroy yours." And like
Mm.
if you've got these digital drugs that are just everywhere, that everybody's got the different button, they've got a red and a green and a blue button that makes you feel different things. It's like, "Well, everybody else is doing it. So why shouldn't I be able to do it?" And it's like, "Well, some people can handle it and other people can't." And it's I can't imagine what it's gonna do to society. I think it's gonna be one of the most destructive things that we've ever had to deal with, and I don't know that it's something that we're going to be able to combat. Like, it's gonna happen like that. It's gonna happen so fast. As soon as the technology is available, as soon as you're capable of going down to your local Neuralink dealer and getting this thing put into your head, you're gonna be able to go on the internet and download this program. People are gonna like one of the first things that happened with iPhones when they came out is people were able to jailbait them and hack them.
Mm.
And it's just gonna happen with these things just as well. And like there's also gonna be other problems with like how much surveillance are they gonna be able to do on your brain when you have something like that? And are they gonna be able to control what you think and how you think? Like there's a lot of problems that are gonna come with these brain computer interface devices.
So that was something I touched on
Yep.
in the book also. And Yeah, I think that mind control could very well manifest in a way that we're not traditionally thinking of it, right? Like it's not they type in a specific text command and you comply. I don't know that we're anywhere close to being uh, that precise.
Yeah.
But if you want to, instead of going after the cortex, instead of going after somebody's hormonal responses, which are our very core mechanisms by which we are, our survival is driven. We secrete a hormone when we're hungry, and it pushes us to feel a certain thing, which then compels us to do this other thing. Well, if you have more direct control over somebody's hormonal responses to things, you can very quickly start to condition them.
Hmm.
So maybe you can't directly, issue specific commands, but I think it'd be damn close enough that free will becomes a rather dicey issue.
Yeah, it's easy to influence people. And like that's what current advertising already does. Hey, you've got this medical problem with you, and look at you've got a solution. And don't pay attention to that minute long list of side effects that those are rare, don't worry about that. Just go to your doctor, aka your drug dealer, and tell them
Yep.
that you want this drug. And like it wouldn't if if the propaganda didn't work, it wouldn't be necessary, right?
Yes.
Like if it didn't work, they wouldn't be spending millions and millions of dollars every week to advertise on these shows. Like it works. It's able to push these people to go to their doctor and ask for some fucking drug that could kill them,
Mm.
very easily or destroy their life. And like I it's really crazy to like see how I always thought like when I grew up as a dirt bike racer and I would get hurt and the doctor would patch me up and that would be it. So I had this like reverence for doctors that they were, these great people who, healed you up and got you back out on your feet again. But like at the time, I was only breaking bones and tearing ligaments. I didn't like have any of these major, medical problems. And like I learned very quickly when I got, the amputation that like most of the doctors out there suck and they are propagandized just as easily as normal people. They think that one way is the only way, you know. I I have somebody in my family who has problems with skin cancers, and they, there's these. I don't know if you've heard about it or not, but I guess there's this cocktail that you can take that supposedly kills cancers if you do it right, and it's ivermectin, fenbenzidol, THC, and a couple of different things. It's called the I don't remember what it's called, but it's some protocol, and they've done studies on this, and it tends to work a lot of the
Mhm.
time. And so, like, somebody had recommended her, "Hey, take ivermectin paste, like horse paste, essentially what they what they accused Joe Rogan of taking, and rub it on your face at night, and it'll help the cancers come to the surface." And so she does this, and she's just got a ton of cancers that come to the surface. And she goes to her doctor, and the doctor's like, "Wow, like this is great. Like we're able to burn these things off now, and like this is awesome. What did you do for this?" And she told him, and he was just like, I don't want to hear it. Don't even tell me. Like it's no." And it's like, what how could you not be interested in that? You yourself said that this was a great thing and that
Right.
it helped you a lot, but you don't even want to look into it because you've been propagandized by the drug companies to think that this is an evil drug or it doesn't work or whatever the case is. And when in reality, the only real reason that ivermectin isn't used for everything is because you can't make a ton of money off of it. It's cheap and it's easily, available to normal people. And now you can buy it in pharmacies. You can buy it at like, um, I don't remember what one of the pharmacies I go to, you're allowed to buy it now. And, doctors don't even want to hear it. And that's
So,
to me, that's influence. That's influence by the pharmaceutical companies.
oh, yeah, no question. So, my father was a doctor.
Uh-huh.
So, you talk about having reverence for medical professionals.
Yeah.
Same here. Um, and I will also agree with you and say most doctors do suck. One of the reasons why I didn't go to doctors for very much of anything was because, growing up in my dad's home, obviously I didn't need to go to the doctor nearly as
Yeah.
much. I was just, but it wasn't just how he treated me as a patient. Like I got to see how he treated his patients. And so when I grew up, moved out, I was expecting that from the doctors that I would go see. And instead, what I saw was doctors who would barely even look at me because they're just looking at the chart.
Yep.
Yeah, well, all
Yep.
they wanted to do was turn the exam room so they could bill the next patient because a lot of doctors, they got into it for the money.
Hmm.
And it's just like everything else. Money tends to ruin a lot of crap. I don't think that somebody's personal health and well being should be tied to how much they are worth monetarily to you. You know, that those two should not be anywhere near each other.
Hmm.
Um, and it's the same thing. Like, oh well, if I just promote this catalog of stuff, then I'll get whatever fees or whatever from the pharmaceutical industries. Yeah, it's I mean, again, this is why cyberpunk as a genre started to
Hmm.
appeal to me a whole lot more. Fantasy deals with broader, more esoteric things like morality, which
Hmm.
you said is it's messy, it can be tricky, and it can make some great points with that. And it harkens back to some of our oldest literature. So no hate on fantasy, still love it, but I think that the morality of economics is something that's more in your face these
Yeah.
days. This is a genre that deals much more with it because there is a morality to
Hmm.
economics. We're not doing very well with it right now.
No, like, dude, I didn't learn anything about economics when I was in high school. Nothing. We didn't even have a class on it. And I think that's by design. I think that normal
Yes.
people aren't supposed to understand economics and they want you to think that it's a whole lot more difficult to understand than it actually is. Like, I didn't know anything about economics until I got into Bitcoin. And then it was like after I'm starting to learn a little bit and I read a book on Austrian economics, it's like, well, this isn't as difficult as I thought it would be. Like, it's pretty basic, especially within our society. It's like you print money, it devalues the currency, it makes everybody poor. Like, that's a very easy concept to understand. And like, I was talking to somebody in my family recently, and I was like, we were talking about inflation, and I'm thinking to myself, I don't think they even understand what inflation actually is. And I go, what do you think inflation is? And they go, well, it means that prices go up. And I go, sure, that's price inflation, but what causes the prices to go up? And I had to explain, like, as you print money, it devalues the currency. So imagine like you're playing Monopoly and all of a sudden the banker opens another Monopoly game, takes all the money and puts it into their pile and says, "Well, this is how much money we're dealing with now." Now, all the money that you have is worthless compared to what the money that they have. And it was like, "Oh yeah, that makes sense." Because yeah, it's not a difficult concept to understand, you know? And like we were talking about earlier, like the whole game is to is for the rich to take money from the poor. This is Robin Hood in a lot of ways, you know? And like as long as the poor doesn't understand what's happening to them, they'll continue to, exist within the system. Like I've got people in my family that are holding six figures in cash in their savings accounts right now. And I'm like, what are you doing? Like, you need to invest in something that is going to make you money because every day that you keep that money in cash, you are losing value. You are losing purchasing power. Like, it's crazy. Like I was hearing Rand Paul talk a couple of weeks ago, and I usually agree with everything he says, but for the most part, like he really pissed me off when he was talking about the middle class. He's like, "Well, look, if you look at the numbers, the middle class is larger today than it's ever been in our country." And it's like, "Okay, well, technically there's always going to be a middle class. It's not
Right.
about how big the middle class is, it's about what type of purchasing power they have." And right
Yes.
now, their purchasing power is falling off a fucking cliff. And like that's the takeaway that people should be taking is not, yeah, sure, there's always going to be a middle class. And like, you know, in your book, like there's sure there's a middle class, but they're living in squalor, you know. They're
Yes.
having to cheat, borrow, and steal. They're having to go to a veterinary clinic when they're sick or injured because normal medical care is so far gone from them that they can't even go to a normal doctor.
Yes. Absolutely right. Yeah. That's where people start playing around with the definition of words, right?
Yeah.
Like yeah, technically, like if you have a top and a bottom, there's always going to be a middle. But you know, if the middle is now capable of what the bottom used to be, I mean, what value is even that stratification?
Yeah. I saw a tweet the other day that I thought was great. It was just a short tweet and it said, I need Bitcoin to go to $1 million so I can live like a 1970s carpenter.
Yeah.
All
That was,
right.
you know what? That was something that really that occurred to me just recently was like I will never be as financially well off as my father was at my age,
Mm-mm.
simply by virtue of the world being a different place. It's not because I slacked or something like that. You know, it's just the things don't work that way anymore.
No, they don't. My mom bought a house when she was a senior in high school. She paid like $70,000 for an 1,100 square foot house in Northern California. Today, that house it was for sale on Zillow a couple years ago for $740,000.
I don't doubt it.
A
Yeah.
100x, and this is a terrible, shitty little house that was built in the freaking 80s, like, but that's the position that we're in today, like, the only mistake I made when I moved here to Idaho was I bought a house in a homeowners association, which was a big mistake. And like their entire goal is to make the cost of their house go up, to make their appraisal value go up. And like I was getting into arguments with them about stupid shit before COVID hit. And then COVID hit, and they're still doing the same nickel and diming people trying to put liens on their house for not taking care of their yard well enough. And I go, at one point, I was like, hey, look, guys, whatever you do in these meetings, you are never going to make a difference in a meaningful way that's going to like make your house go up as much as just money printing did during COVID. Like, look at what happened. The value of your house went up 40%. And now you're wanting to nickel and dime people and put liens on their house so you can get another half a percent. Like,
Right.
shut up. Like, you're already sitting pretty. Like, your kids are never going to be able to buy a house. Like, just be okay with what you have, and stop screwing with people. It's crazy.
Yes.
All
I'm
right.
there with
Well, the last thing I kind of wanted to bring up, and we talked a little bit about this before we got on air, but it's really important. Like, if people are going to go out and buy your book, and I really hope they do, leave a review on Amazon. Like, I cannot stress how important this is because just me as like a consumer of books, I've noticed this recently where you've got established writers like Andy Weir, who I was struggling to come up with his name off air. If as soon as Andy Weir puts out a book, people know his name. He's got name recognition from, the big screen with The Martian, and immediately he's going to get thousands and thousands of reviews on his book. And that makes it go to the front page where people are going to see it where, you know, back when The Martian came out on Audible, there was very few audiobooks. It was still kind of a niche thing where people sorry, I've got like a frog in my throat the last couple minutes. It was a niche thing that not a ton of people did. Books were still mostly done in print. You had Harry Potter, you had Lord of the Rings, you had these big books that were made into audiobooks, but essentially like normal people didn't have the money. Like smaller writers didn't have the money to create an audiobook. Well, now that price has gone a lot, it's gone down a lot because the technology now, like somebody who wants to, I had a narrator on a couple weeks ago who just kind of wanted to narrate his own books. So he bought the equipment and now he's making books for other people. And it's cheap enough for like an author like you to be able to go, well, hey, I could invest a couple grand and get this thing onto Audible and get people reading it. But the problem is like there's so many books on Audible now that like if you get 50 reviews, like that's a lot of reviews, where these guys like Alistair Reynolds and Andy Weir and, some of these other big authors in science fiction are going to get thousands and thousands of reviews. So, like, you got to get these smaller creators, these smaller writers enough views so it can be, elevated to the front page on Amazon. And like, I'm sure it's a really tough thing to do as a writer to like get people to review this thing. And I was wondering, like, what are some of the ways you've gotten, some of the ways that you've kind of like tried to get people to leave a review? I did see your last page was like, please leave a review on this book. It's very important, but there has to be other ways to get this done as well.
So um, I had when I first released, I had what I called a my street team, which was a group of people that I knew. Um, I didn't have any kind of like official relationship with them, but they were people who had agreed once the book was published. Um, I gave them review copies.
Mhm.
I sent them a book for free, and I asked that upon completing it, I didn't care what they thought of it. I mean, yes, of course I did, but I said, just do me a favor. Like, I'll leave a review, whatever rating you want to give it. Just give it a rating. Give me a couple of sentences. That took care of 15 because of the 50 people I asked,
Yeah.
it was it is. It's a very big barrier. As much as I've tried to knock it down, like providing a QR code at the back of the book so that, hey, you just finished it. It's in your hand. Just
Mhm.
scan this, it'll go right to the page. Just give me but it's hard. The other thing I would do is when I've done a couple of book signings. So people come in, say, great, of course I'll sign the book, make it out to whoever. And when I hand it to them, I'll just say like, hey, when you finish, I'd love it if you could just share your thoughts, give a review. It's just a lot of very humble asking,
Mhm.
and it's still the rate of return is pretty low.
Do you have a sequel? Like, I saw that, like, you've kind of opened this book up for a sequel, if you decided to go there. Are you planning on a sequel, or are you going down a completely different route and, like, gonna do a different type of cyberpunk, or what's the plan on that?
So I'm about what 90,000 words into the next book. I am resistant to the idea of a sequel because I worry about falling down the slippery slope of having art become product.
Mhm.
You can usually feel it, even if you can't put your finger on it, when something was created to be sold as opposed to be shared. That's not to say I don't want to make money on the book,
Yeah.
but I want there to be a certain like a soul to it, a certain authenticity. There's something in it that I just wanted to share. So the second book is a similar style of cyberpunk. There's magic. It's a different kind of magic. It's actually voodoo,
Ooh,
and
I like
it's
voodoo.
I have learned a lot about it. And it's in this case, instead of just general corporate authoritarianism, this is about disaster capitalism and um, the like we were talking about before, the atomization of societies by technology, contrasted with the very community based voodoo practices. So relationships and having real interactions with people, as opposed to what is marketed to us,
Yeah.
and and the battle between those.
Do you have plans for an audiobook for either of these, or are you staying in print for now?
I would love to get an audiobook done for this first one because it's ready to go. I've been hoping that I could get a little bit more notoriety on it
Mhm.
before dropping, like you said, a couple of $1,000s to get it
Yeah.
put into audio. But I am almost certainly going to do that this year.
Cool.
'Cause it's a big market. I listen to a lot of books on audio, even though I still read, old fashioned way. So I want to put that out. I know a lot of people have asked me about it because people who are busy. I have a couple of friends who are contractors. They love to put in earbuds while they
Yeah.
work. They don't have the option of sitting down and
Yeah.
reading like that. They'd love to read more. So I will be doing that. I just don't have
Cool.
a target date yet.
So I've got a couple suggestions, and I'm sure you've probably thought about this, but like some of the audiobooks that I read, they will have at the end of the book, they will have the first chapter of the next book or another book that they're reading, which I think is a good way to like, hey, this is an advertisement essentially to, and we've been
Yes.
talking a lot about advertising, but this is an advertisement to go out and buy the next book. And then, like, hopefully you could even set it up to where it's like, hey, if you can prove to me that you left a review on the first book, I'll give you 10% off on the second book or something like that. Like, or hey, if you take a picture. If you bought the physical copy of the book, take a picture of it, put it on your Instagram, leave a review, and I'll send you a signed copy of the second book or something like that. Like
Like
there's
that.
ways that I've told my buddy who's a contractor this a lot of times. It's like, hey, you should tell the people if you're working on their house, if you're building them a new kitchen or something like that, tell them, hey, take a picture of the kitchen that I built, put it on your Instagram and your Facebook, and I'll give you 10% off your next project, because you never know when somebody's going to have 10,000 followers on Instagram or,
Right.
a bunch of people because you don't know what people are doing online. It could happen. So like, I think there's creative ways that you could leverage to hopefully get these things into the mainstream because like good cyberpunk is a great listen, and, like, I've listened to some cyberpunk recently that I wasn't a huge fan of. It was a little bit too far gone,
Mhm.
a little bit unrealistic in a way that, like, this is just never gonna happen type of thing, where your book is, like, you can very easily see a lot of the things coming, down the pike in the very near future.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you. I mean, that's exactly what I wanted to portray.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that it landed.
Excellent. Well, I think hour and a half. I think we did it. Tell people where they can go buy the books. Is Amazon the best way to do it? Do you have a website where it's better for people to go, or does it kind of not matter where they buy it?
Yeah, I don't source my own sales because I went traditional publishing.
Mhm.
So yeah, Amazon is good, but if you prefer Barnes and Noble, that works. Pretty much anywhere you can go online to get books, you can find me. Amazon is if you do go Amazon, I'd appreciate a review.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. Does Amazon have an option to advertise like on the site essentially where you can pay some money to have it thrown up on some page or something like that?
you can buy Amazon ads. There is a whole sub school of learning about that I would want to dive way more deeply into before I start throwing money at it.
Yeah,
But
that
it
makes
is an
sense.
option, yes.
That makes sense. Yeah. It's yeah. I I've I've had problems renting rooms on Facebook recently. And every once in a while they'll show you an ad opportunity. Hey, take out an ad and it's like I don't know that I trust you to like advertise in the right place to the right person. Like, you know, real quick and then we'll get out of here. Like there's a restaurant in town that I really like. It's a barbecue restaurant. They do really well. They make really good barbecue, but every time I go in there, they're completely empty. And
Oh,
I was asking them like, "What are you guys doing to advertise?" Like and they were like, "Dude, it's hard to advertise these days. Like, where are you going to do it? Like, there's no local TV anymore, so you can't buy a TV spot. Nobody listens to the radio. Like, you can do targeted YouTube ads,
mhm.
but we're not really sure who they're showing it to and like if it's it's clearly not working. So like we haven't been doing that. And it's like it's tough for a smaller, creator or company to advertise these days. And like I don't know how that's, even billboards are tougher these days because they're kind of owned by these bigger companies. And if you want to get a billboard, you're gonna have to pay a heck of a lot of money to get it because the
Yeah,
competition is willing to pay, you know?
yeah.
All
Goes back
right.
to that where's the room for the small guy?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Well, Russell, it's been a pleasure talking with you. I can't wait for your next book to come out. You'll have to send me an email and I'll, read the next one and we'll do this again.
I will send you a free copy. I
Oh,
appreciate it.
absolutely. And I will give you a review.
Thank you.
All right. It
Thanks
was
for
been a
having me
pleasure.
back. I always enjoy this.
Yep, absolutely. All right. Take care. Thanks for listening, everybody. Good night.